And then the reason why we talk about carbohydrates is not because you need to live a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet if you don't want to. I'm not saying that. You don't have to be keto. You don't have to follow Atkins. But carbohydrates have the most profound impact on how we metabolize all other nutrients. They either allow you to flip on the switch to burning fat for fuel the rest of the day, or they flip off the switch to burning fat for fuel. They're not evil. I'm not telling you that you have to avoid them. They just have this profound impact on how we metabolize everything else we consume throughout the day.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today I'm going to teach you why what you've been eating for breakfast is probably causing weight gain and disease, and what to do instead. Back in the day, I was a professional ballet dancer, and I started training when I was a really young girl. And I always struggled with my weight and my body. I never was able to achieve exactly where I needed to be to really do well in the sport. And I tried all of the different diets out there. I did the zone diet. I did Weight Watchers. I was extremely low fat. I was low calorie. I was vegan, vegetarian. I avoided dairy. Let's see, I have them all written down here. Oh, and I ate watermelon, only watermelon for quite a few weeks to see what impact that would have. But I never still was able to achieve my goals, and I was told that I was fat countless number of times. For breakfast, I would often eat steel-cut oats with blueberries and like a vanilla-flavored yogurt on top. I would go with just a fat-free yogurt and maybe a piece of fruit. Then I was told that I should just eat fruit and nothing else, so I did that for a while. When it was everything low-fat and vegetarian, I would eat an Eggo waffle with no butter and maybe some fat-free, sugar-free syrup on there. I went through a phase where I would make all those protein cookies and protein balls that you can find the recipe for, and I would eat those. Tried everything in the book. I would eat cereal with skim milk because it was all fat-free, had the heart healthy stamp on it, and I still struggled. It took me so long, and earning a PhD in nutrition and becoming a registered dietitian along with doing all of my research and basically flipping everything I learned during my studies upside down and doing the opposite to figure out what actually worked. And as a result, I dropped body fat, had good energy, gained muscle, dropped the terrible heartburn that I had. Oh my gosh, my heartburn was so bad that at one point I went to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack because for some reason when I get heartburn, I get referred pain down my left arm. And they sent me home with Prilosec, which took it away. So I was in my mid-20s taking Prilosec while eating a quote-unquote healthy diet that any normal registered dietitian would tell you to eat. So if you're struggling with heartburn, you don't feel good, you eat breakfast like I mentioned, I want you to know that it is a struggle and I feel you, and you can find freedom and you can turn it around. So after finding and figuring out what worked for my body, I started to help others. And that's what we're going to dive into today, is what to eat for breakfast and why, so that you have good health and good energy for the rest of your life. The first thing to understand is that breakfast is actually not the most important meal of the day. That was a marketing claim created by Kellogg in 1944 to simply sell more of his breakfast cereals, which I think he did, because even to this day, we think that it's true nutrition and science fact, but it's not. What breakfast is, though, it is the most important meal to get right because it sets your entire day up for either success or failure. It controls you. The first meal that you eat in the day, it doesn't matter if it's in the morning or in the afternoon, controls you for the rest of the day. This first meal that you eat during the day, no matter what time it is either going to tell your body, signal to your body to maintain or build muscle or lose muscle. It's going to either tell your body that it's hungry and has cravings, or it's going to tell your body that you're satiated and you're in control. So what you want to eat for this first meal of the day, and again, it doesn't matter if it's in regular breakfast time or if your first meal is around lunchtime, whatever time it might be, the goal is about 30 to 45 grams of protein, healthy fats, and lower carb or at least low glycemic index carbohydrates. And I'll talk about what those are here in a minute. The reason why you want to have adequate protein in there, which again, for most people and everybody's different, but I'm just giving you a broad range so you have something to follow. It's about 30 to 45 grams of protein. It allows your muscle mass to start to synthesize more muscle. The reason why you want to get healthy fats is because those fats keep you full and satiated and actually will leave you eating less calories throughout the day. And then the reason why we talk about carbohydrates is not because you need to live a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet if you don't want to. I'm not saying that. You don't have to be keto. You don't have to follow Atkins. But carbohydrates have the most profound impact on how we metabolize all other nutrients. They either allow you to flip on the switch to burning fat for fuel the rest of the day, or they flip off the switch to burning fat for fuel. They're not evil. I'm not telling you that you have to avoid them. They just have this profound impact on how we metabolize everything else we consume throughout the day. There's this myth out there that sugar is great for energy. It's really not the case. When we consume too much sugar, when we consume too much carbohydrate, we have these massive spikes of blood glucose. So I want to just walk you through the science of how this works. Let's say you eat a breakfast like I did, the steel-cut oats, the flavored yogurt, and the blueberries. That goes into our gut and it's metabolized out into our blood as let's think of single glucose molecules, sugar molecules. So the word glucose and sugar, we're going to use synonymously like they're the same thing. They go into the blood and our body can only tolerate a certain amount of sugar at any given time. And that's about 1 to 2 teaspoons. That's not very much. And the amount of sugar or carbohydrate consumed in that breakfast is a lot. I haven't done the math before this, but let's say about 10 teaspoons or more of sugar. So that's a toxic load to the body. And so the body wants to get that sugar out of the blood. So it tells your pancreas to release a hormone called insulin. And I want you to imagine insulin like a little key that travels around the body in the blood, and it should open up your muscle cells and let that sugar flow in. Once that sugar flows into the muscle cell, then you have the energy to go about your day and you should be feeling great with all that energy. Well, what happens over time as we age, especially as we start to gain fat, especially if you have fat around the belly, is I want you to think that the muscle cell gets a little callous over it. It can't open up anymore. So you eat that same breakfast you used to tolerate because that little insulin key could open up the cell. But now you eat that breakfast and the key travels around and it bounces off that cell wall. It's all full of sugar anyway, doesn't really need any more. And that sugar then in the blood can't go in there. And so it starts to overflow. And now we've got all this sugar stuck in the blood with nowhere to go. It's toxic to the body. That's when you have this massive glucose spike. And we've got to get the sugar out somehow. So I want you to imagine this sugar now flips over into fat. So if you're storing fat all throughout the body, especially in the belly, it means that it's a protective mechanism by the body to get the sugar out of the blood. Because when we have high sugar loads in the blood, a lot of negative things happen. One thing is called glycation. And what glycation is when the sugar molecules in the blood bounce up against protein molecules. They bounce up, and I want you to imagine they stick together and they form a new type of molecule called AGEs. And AGEs, it stands for advanced glycation end products. And you don't want to have a lot of AGEs in the body because the AGEs age you. Get it? No pun intended. But anyway, those AGEs are in there and they cause damage to your tissues, to your organs. They cause heart disease, kidney disease. They cause skin issues where you're going to get more wrinkles and inflammations and you're going to age speedier. It causes brain degeneration. So you don't want to have AGEs in there. You don't want to have a lot of glycation in there. Another thing that it produces is things called free radicals. And free radicals are produced naturally in the body, so a little of them are okay. And then we take in antioxidants from our colorful fruits and veggies like berries or spinach, all those good things that we know we should eat. And those antioxidants come around and they sequester or absorb all of those free radicals and get rid of them. Well, when we consume too much sugar, the byproduct of that sugar metabolism are all of those little free radicals. And I want you to think of a free radical like a little troublemaker. And it's a little troublemaker and it flows around and it tries to steal things from other molecules. And it's an unstable molecule. And then it goes around and steals things and makes those other things unstable. And it's just this chain reaction of lots of unstable reactive molecules in your body. And that is linked to a whole host of negative health consequences as well. like the same things I mentioned: heart disease, type 2 diabetes, brain degeneration, wrinkles. So people who eat a lot of sugar or high glycemic carbohydrates, and those high glycemic carbohydrates are all the things that I mentioned I ate for breakfast. Oatmeal, things like cereals and skim milk, fruit juice, processed foods, baked goods, cookies, chips, all of those things that come in boxes and bags and not from your refrigerator. So you want to make sure for that reason that you focus on a breakfast that does not have these high glycemic, high carbohydrate loads so that you can get stable blood sugar levels throughout the day. These massive blood glucose spikes also damage your mitochondria. Your mitochondria are the powerhouse of your cells. It's where all of the energy is produced. So when you damage those mitochondria, it causes a lot of other issues in the body. It can cause chronic fatigue and even adrenal fatigue in the body. So if you are just tired all of the time, fibromyalgia, autoimmune conditions, a lot of these can at least be exacerbated by these massive blood glucose swings and these compensatory lows. Another thing that can be impacted by these massive blood glucose swings, especially for us ladies, is fertility. We have a lot of clients who come in to see us because they have fertility issues, and they end up having babies not necessarily because they drop the weight, but because they create this metabolic shift in the body where they've got less free radicals, less glycation happening, and just less overall stress happening in the body with more stable glucose levels. It's also important to understand that these swings of blood glucose don't just impact those of you with type 2 diabetes, but those of you who have fine, healthy systems as well. My husband, Doug, he's a physician, but he comes from genetics associated with obesity and diabetes, so he might be a little bit predisposed. He wore a continuous glucose monitor, and that is a device that you stick on your shoulder generally, and it's a little thread that goes through into your blood, and it can measure at any given time. It's really cool what your blood glucose levels are. So if you are questioning what foods impact your body and how, get a CGM. There's a lot of great companies out there. If you have any questions on which ones, just drop a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, and I'll provide you with all of those suggestions and recommendations. But anyway, he was wearing his CGM for a few months, and tortilla chips caused it to skyrocket. Oatmeal, and he tried all the different oatmeal, steel cut, the instant versus the stuff that's not steel coat. I don't know. I don't enjoy oatmeal anymore. It gives me heartburn, so I don't know all the details, but the oatmeal did negatively impact his blood glucose. And then beans. My mother, she's in her 70s. She stuck a CGM on her arm too and found out that tortilla chips and beans for her too made her glucose go wild. So you never know. People are different in how it impacts it. For my husband, but not my mother, potatoes significantly impact his blood glucose, both sweet potatoes and white potatoes. When you have these blood glucose spikes too often, that's when you start to develop type 2 diabetes, and you really see the negative impact in your system. Dr. Amen, he's a leading psychiatrist here in America. He says that a fat-based approach diet, not again keto or Atkins, but consuming those healthy fats and really following low glycemic index carbohydrates and adequate protein reduces your risk of Alzheimer's disease by 43%. If you follow a high carbohydrate, high glycemic diet, like I mentioned, the pastas and breads and cookies and crackers and fruit juice and all of those things, you're at a 400% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. This shows you that all calories are not equal. We've been told that to drop weight and get healthy, we just need to eat less and move more, and that all calories are the same. But this shows you that that's not the case. It's like saying all miles are the same. But if I told you to walk up a mile or walk down a mile or walk a flat mile, you'd understand that your experience would be completely different. The same goes with your food. If I gave one person a banana and another person an egg for breakfast, the same total calories, the person with the egg would have a much better life experience afterward because their body chemistry and their blood glucose levels would be much more stabilized. So I hope you can understand how calories are different, and what you choose to eat specifically for this first meal of the day significantly impacts your health, your body chemistry, your mood, and even your brain health. So here are the tips for breakfast. Number 1 is avoid sweet foods and think more savory. So here are the foods that you want to avoid: cereals, fat-free and low-fat yogurts, bars, specifically like Larabar, even the bars that say they only have 5 ingredients, but they're all dates and fruits and sugar in its varied natural form. One thing, as I go off on a tangent, that the body doesn't care where the sugar's coming from. It doesn't really care if it's a fruit sugar or a non-fruit sugar. It still metabolically impacts your chemistry very similarly. You want to avoid fruit juice, smoothies made with fruit juice base. You want to avoid crackers, toast, plain fruit. Even if you juice your own fruit, the problem is that when you do that, you take out all of the fiber. And when you take out the fiber, all it leaves is the sugar, and it's going to spike your glucose like crazy. So if you really want to get that fruit in, you want to focus on berries because they're going to spike your glucose less significantly. They have much more fiber, more antioxidants, just better bang for your buck for all fruits. So if you're going to incorporate fruits, then you want to make sure you incorporate all of them and you don't juice them, but you rather blend them with something. If you just have to, for some reason, have to incorporate some of these foods into your breakfast meal, which I will say I advise you just let go of completely for that first meal. But let's say for some reason you're just not going to, then there are a few hacks that you can do to slow or mitigate that blood glucose spike. So one thing is to make sure that you add protein. Protein is going to make that digestion in the gut a little bit more difficult, so it's going to slow that spike. So if we go back to the smoothie example, if you add in those berries, then just make sure you add in a nice protein powder. And then another thing that slows the spike is adding fats in there. So you want to make sure that with that meal, you have some fat. So if we go back to the smoothie, you could add a little coconut oil in there, avocado oil, olive oil, maybe a little heavy cream, something like that. And then the other thing that delays the spike a bit is fiber. So you could get that fiber from the berries that you're sticking in there, maybe some spinach. So my favorite smoothie recipe, if you want to make that for breakfast, might be an unsweetened almond milk. You could drop some frozen berries in there, some frozen spinach, any kind of frozen veggie, really. You could do frozen zucchini or broccoli. I know that sounds crazy, but maybe start with spinach. You really can taste it. And then I add a little heavy cream in there because that's my favorite food personally. Some ice, and then blend it up with a little bit of protein powder, around 30 to 45 grams or so. Now, one note to mention is if you are a PhD client and your macros aren't just what I explained for that breakfast meal, let's say you're not getting 30 to 45 grams of protein, it's something else, do not fret. Your nutritionist has made your macros exactly where they need to be, and that's why you see continued weight loss success. Don't feel you need to change anything. If you're not a current PhD client, then these could be some good guidelines for you to start to follow to change up your breakfast and see that more stabilized blood glucose level throughout the day. Number 2 is drop the regular cow's milk and the oat milk. I know that this is difficult for a lot of people because you just love your milk, but I'm telling you that regular cow's milk is made for a baby calf that's in growth mode, and you are not in growth mode anymore. Research shows that the dairy in milk actually spikes your blood glucose 6 times higher than other forms of protein. So dairy is just not the best form of protein if you're trying to monitor your blood glucose levels. Oat milk is a disaster when it comes to blood glucose regulation. I actually went into a coffee joint the other week and all they served was oat milk. And I was just like so taken aback. Everyone in there was spiking their blood glucose like crazy. And then they add, the flavored syrups in there and get a pastry. And I was just sitting there like with my head in my hands, feeling so bad for all of these people who are just going to have major cravings and binges and hunger the rest of the day. The deal with the processing of the oats is that it does something that allows for this massive sugar spike. So oat milk will spike someone's blood glucose by 29 points versus 9 points associated with an unsweetened nut milk like coconut milk or almond milk. So if you're going to use something for a creamer, I always advise heavy cream because it's delicious and creamy. But if you don't like heavy cream, then go for an unsweetened almond or coconut milk over the regular cow's milk and over the oat milk for sure. And then number 3 is what to eat. Think savory. If your meal in front of you for that first meal of the day is savory, then you are likely right on track. So this could be eggs in all of their varied forms. You could do poached egg, an omelet with some added veggies in there, which would be great for some fiber to slow the spike even more. You could do a frittata. There's so many different ways to eat your eggs. If you really don't want to eat eggs, then you could do a full-fat plain Greek yogurt. Remember that the fat in there helps delay the spike a little bit. And I always advise Greek yogurt because through the processing, the filtration of it, it compounds the amount of protein. So you can get double, triple the amount of protein in there for less carbohydrate. So a full-fat plain Greek yogurt, note that the flavoring makes it sweet, and so that's going to be a sugar in there, and lots of the sweetened flavored yogurts, no matter what type of milk, if it's like a pea milk, pea or nut or whatever it might be, oat, all of that stuff increases the likelihood that it's going to spike your blood glucose. So best bet is going to be an unflavored, plain, full-fat Greek yogurt, and then you can add your own berries, nuts, and seeds to it and make it so delicious. If you really want to eat a cereal, there is a higher protein, kind of lower carb cereal called Catalina Crunch. I have no association with it, but just want to give you some good suggestions. Some people like Magic Spoon. I'm not a huge fan. It tastes pretty processed to me, but I like Catalina a little bit better. So you could also do something that's unconventional. You could do dinner for breakfast. You don't necessarily have to do something that's conventional and sweet. So you could do leftovers from dinner. You could do lunch for breakfast. So here's what I often do. I usually will just have some coffee with heavy cream for my breakfast. And then I usually eat around 11:30 or noon. And what that meal is usually about 30 to 45 grams of protein. And it will be some kind of ground beef or turkey or chicken. And I add all different colored vegetables in there. I'll do some onion, maybe some garlic, because those give you some different compounds that help with immunity. I'll put some purple cabbage cut up in there and some different colored bell peppers in there, maybe some mushrooms. Then I will add some bone broth to it and kind of make it like a soup. And I love cheese, so I add some Parmesan cheese to it. And oddly enough, some seaweed flakes. I'll maybe mention the brand in the description below, but the seaweed gives you a lot of different types of minerals in there, like iodine, which we need for thyroid support. So I'm really looking at it not necessarily for taste, although I think it tastes good. I'm looking at it as to how it's going to serve my body, how it's going to give it focus for the rest of the day so I can go out and be with my 3 kids and my husband and manage a business that has 70 amazing team members and serve thousands of people. So that is my goal, and that's how I look at how food is going to fuel me. So in general, those are the things you want to focus on. Number 1, avoid sweet foods, starchy foods for breakfast. Number 2, drop the oat milk and the regular cow's milk. Use an unsweetened almond or coconut milk or heavy cream instead. And number 3, think savory. But in general, the first step to living an optimized life is to focus on the first meal that you eat during the day. All right, I hope that you got a lot of great value from this episode. If you did and you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a comment, some feedback. I would love to read it. If you're listening to this as a podcast on Spotify or something similar, then please follow and leave a review. You could also take a screenshot of this and share it to social media so that we can share it and impact more people and get more people eating this great breakfast so that they feel best and can give back to society and be with their kids and families and grandkids and have a great life experience. So remember, you've got to step up and make the change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and don't negotiate with your body. See you next time.